Okay. Ah, dear. Ah, here we go again. Well, welcome, folks, and welcome back to previous viewers. This is another one in my series of sharing our stories, because I believe that by sharing our stories, we help to heal each other. My guest this evening, for you, this morning for me, is the lovely Liz Shortall. And what can I say? She's an amazing human being, and I don't like putting labels on people, but I just get a sense, like me, that she is another wounded healer, and they're the best types of people. So I'll hand the floor over to you, Liz, and just encourage you to share your story, especially the early years and the trials and tribulations of that time. But it's your story, so tell it your way.
Okay, thanks, Bob, and thanks a million for having me. It's so great to meet you and to be here chatting to you. And you're up so early to do this. I appreciate it. So gosh, there's a lot. When someone says tell your story, there's a lot I can say. I'm originally from North Dublin, in Ireland, and I grew up in a family of 7, and I suppose I thought I was a very happy-go-lucky child, which I was, but parallel to that, quite young, I would have experienced anxiety, and it was something that I thought everybody experienced. I just thought everyone had that constant knot in their stomach, and it wasn't until many, many years later, and using many different methods, healthy and unhealthy, to get rid of that knot in my stomach, that I realized, oh, everyone does feel anxiety, but not to this extent. And it pretty much led me down the path of learning all about mindfulness and things like that, which just wasn't around when I was a child. You know, growing up, I'm 44 now, and growing up back then, it was, wasn't necessarily children can be seen and not heard, but there wasn't that much room, I suppose, for individuality. Children were just shipped off to school, shipped off to wherever, and you all mucked in and got on with it, and sometimes the sensitive souls, probably like myself, felt a bit knocked around by that kind of way of life, So I'm trying to think where to go now, Bob, with this.
Well, can I ask a question?
Yeah, great, yeah.
And these just come to me, so I'll try and let you finish your point before I interject. But for me, the question I would ask, in your childhood, can you recall, going back, can you recall any moment when you felt frightened, any moment when you felt terrified or lost or abandoned, or because it only takes one moment? Can you from your early years, like during the first 7, can you recall anything like that?
I'm trying to think. I have a really bad memory of my early years up until almost secondary school. So,
well, I'll let you ponder that one, because
yeah,
the subconscious is really good at protecting us. But for me, like just describing your parents' behavior, they weren't emotionally present for you, so, but my experience was during my adult life, I experienced a lot of anxiety, and I actually traced that back to my childhood years when, mum would beat me whether I was good or bad. It just didn't matter. If I got in range and she was having one of her explosions, I got the shit kicked out of me. And then Dad was never to offer support or share his time with me. And so I lived my childhood years in that state of fight or flight. So I was like always anxious, You know, even when I was happy, there was still a little feather of anxiousness about me. And so that became what felt like home for me. Although it was dysfunctional, that was home. And it was that behavior that I carried through into adult life. And so as an adult, I'd get anxious, you know, it was like there was somebody behind me with a knife getting ready to stab me, and I turn around, there's nobody there. But the other thing I've learned about, there is no such thing as mental illness, and that's where I'm coming from. Before going on stage, I'd be in the green room, you know, getting psyched up and tuning my guitar and blah, blah, blah. And I'd be buzzing, you know, stage fright, butterflies in the tummy. And that was like really, really anxious. I wasn't having an anxiety attack. I realized probably about 15 years ago that my body was raising its vibration so that I could go out on stage and deliver the music that was coming through me. So there were two different aspects to anxiety. But
yes, kind of adrenaline. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I know you've mentioned yourself before Gabor Mate, and he talks about, you know, actually that trauma is the root of all addiction, and that the trauma doesn't have to be something huge. Yeah, I know. I'm not judging. I used to smoke myself, and it took me many years to give up. But apparently, trauma is the root of all addiction, according to Gabor Mate, and that the trauma doesn't have to be something big. It just has to be traumatic for the person.
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting way of looking at things, you know, and I went through addiction myself with alcohol. And it was one of the unhealthy ways that I alluded to there, that of how I coped with the anxiety. You know, as soon as I hit kind of 14, there was access to alcohol for me and my friends. And that's where I got my confidence. You know, I got my confidence from the cider bottle and got rid of that anxious feeling. But what I didn't realize was, as time went on, I was blacking out and thought that's what getting drunk was. I had the addiction was there from early on. I had an unhealthy relationship, but being Irish, or probably it's the same. I've been in Australia, I've been in England, I've been in America. You know, there is a culture of drinking, binge drinking, having a good time. It's not necessarily what you would associate with somebody who has an addiction. You may just think, I'm having a good time. I thought having an alcohol addiction was drinking every day. And to be honest, the stereotypical older man with the brown paper bag over the drink or sitting on the park bench. I didn't think a young, educated person would be the person in addiction. I'm loving the thumbs up. There's a reason we've connected, Bob. We've a lot in common.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to what you just said. For me, a generation. I had my first panic attack in '84. Body just going about 3 o'clock in the morning. And that's when I entered the medical model of pills, and those murderous psychiatrists. And it wasn't until 1990, just after I emigrated to Australia, that I came across the work of John Bradshaw. And I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but for me, he's the god. John Bradshaw, and my partner and I at the time, we just bought all his tapes and listened to them 2 or 3 times a week, and invited friends around because we were all doing the work on the inner child. And one of his light bulb moments was, you know, he said childhood abuse sets people up for addictive behaviors. And I've noticed that in my own life. I have a list of addictive substances, and if I try and, you know, I used to be addicted to iced coffee. So if I got rid of that, then the next substance would just get up into pole position. So it's not a substance. There is an innate process behind it. And what I've come to realize is that I still do not love me enough to stop killing me by taking these poisons, like tobacco and rum stuff. So that's where I'm at. But John Bradshaw saved my life.
Yeah.
And then Gabriel Marte has picked up his baton.
Fantastic as well. Yes, he has, for sure. Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? And it's also about the self-love, but also as well getting to the point where you just can't do it anymore with certain substances, where the pain is just too big. It's not when it stops working as such, and then you move on to the next addiction if you don't deal with the root of it. There is some, and I don't know if you believe in this or not, but there is some belief out there that with certain things that it's an allergy with some of the addictions, that it sets off a craving. And once you take the substance, the craving is set off and it's very hard to stop. Some people say that about alcohol as well. I don't know. All I know is if I have some, it's no good for me. I don't want to stop. So I just have to avoid starting in the first place and do a lot of the work.
Yeah. Well, I realized that very soon after 1984, that I was addicted to antidepressants, and they are highly addictive. And after 20 years, I realized that, and I'd taken them all, but every antidepressant I took worked for a while, but then reproduced the original symptoms. But every different antidepressant I took turned me into another person that I didn't like. And so here I am in depression with that pain of depression. And a lot of that pain was actually caused by the addiction and the effects of taking antidepressants. Because, if antidepressants worked, then why are suicide rates just, going exponential? And the answer is simple, because we don't have a healthcare system anymore. We have a disease management system, because they want customers, they don't want cures. And although it sounds sad to say that, I believe that's true, because the pharmaceutical industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and the mental health business is the same. So yeah.
It's a vicious circle, and the medical model is still being used as the primary method of taking care of people with mental illness, unless people go off of their own accord and do otherwise. I worked in the mental health services as a social worker, and there's a lot of good goes on. I worked as a social worker in other areas as well, but like that, it's often about management of a situation, treating a symptom, firefighting, as opposed to getting in there and doing the real work and the real therapy, and having the time and the resources, and even involving the whole family. I don't know if you were aware that my own brother died by suicide. You might have heard me talking about that with Roisin. It's quite some time ago now. His name was Lar, and he was 32 at the time, but he would have had a mental illness. And I always feel that it was very sad that the whole family, or at least the primary people in the family, weren't involved in his mental health service delivery, because people with mental illness, they need support. They need the people around them to know what's going on, and they often can't advocate for themselves. So it's a whole systems, a whole family approach. And I don't know what it's like in Australia. I see in Ireland, there is more talk of things like that. There is more policies about family inclusion for those type of things. But it's essential, because when people aren't well, or even with the likes of high anxiety, there's a difference between mental illness and mental health. People tend to isolate. There's still stigma, there's still shame, there's still, let's try to get through this, So I don't know what it's like over there, but there's almost a big movement here of people being really encouraged to talk about it.
Well, where I've come to in my understanding is, for me, there is no such thing as mental illness. It was intentionally wrongly named. The problem is, it's got nothing to do with the mind. It's a wound of the soul. And for me, this lie really crystallized in about 1880 with the dawn of psychiatry and, you know, bedlam and mental homes. And at those times, if you were an unwed mother, you were deemed insane and you were banged up for life, no jury, no trial. If you were a homosexual, the same thing, you're classed insane and locked away for life, no jury, no trial. And recently I was talking to somebody who knew a lady that had just been released, and she was in her 90s, and she was banged up when she was 20, you know, imprisoned. So, but what's happened since that time is, like, in the 1920s, the Rockefellers took over the education system, and then the Rothschilds had the global banking system, but the Rockefellers also had the oil industry and the petrochemical industry, and all pharmaceuticals are petrochemicals, right? But since that time, through generation over generation over generation, Western society has been taught that this is a mental illness. There is something wrong with you and you need to take this pill. But that pill is just aimed at one thing, and that is to detach you from your feelings. Because I spent over 20 years trying to think my way out of depression, and I've got an amazing intellect, and it's a curse and a blessing, but I couldn't think my way out. It was only when I learned to silence my mind that I could finally hear my heart. And then how I healed my early wounds, apart from writing those letters to mum and dad, but all the wounds that I had inflicted upon me as a child, people talk about, you know, they get suppressed in the subconscious. But for me, they became body memories. They became embedded in my body. And, you know, my panic attack was just my body trying to slap me awake and saying, wake up, mate, you know. And so what I did on the boat was sat down with that pain of depression, and knowing what I know about body work and from my own counseling background, I just let my body do what it wanted to do. So I shouted and screamed and ranted and slept for weeks, and I cried and cried until I should have dried out like an old husk, and screamed and screamed until I couldn't speak anymore. But that was just my body releasing all those childhood, those childhood wounds. And I'd challenge anybody. You look at a little baby, you know, and if they get a prick when we go for a blood test, they'll scream and scream and scream and scream and scream as if they're being murdered. But then, bang, like that, they've done the healing work because of the pain, and they're back in all, it's all giggly goo again. And that's what we've forgotten.
That's why it really bothers me when I see a child falling and somebody saying, stop, you're okay. It's like, let them let it out. And it's really interesting that you were saying about having depression, because, you know, it's been said to me, unexpressed anger turns into a wet blanket of depression. So if you're being treated like that as a child, of course you're going to be angry, and of course it needs to be expressed, and until that time comes. Whereas, you know, I think we're getting a bit better these days at seeing that people are having normal reactions to abnormal situations instead of abnormal reactions to normal situations. We're better at saying, okay, that's a bit effed up. Oh, no wonder that person is behaving like that. Or we're aware that all the people coming from Ukraine to Ireland, wherever they're going, that they're traumatized. We're aware that people need that help. Whereas years ago, it was just like, right, you're out of the situation, it's over. Now, I know that's an extreme example, but that's what we're doing on a smaller scale all the time. Just move on, just suck it up, all of those things. Instead of express it, let it out. I encourage my kids to go and punch the bed or punch the couch, and they do.
Well, I used to, now I freely express my feelings in the moment when appropriate. And I love screaming at trees or diving in the ocean and just screaming under the water. But you said something about families back just then. And one thing that John Bradshaw talks about is like the family is like a mobile with all these little elements. There's mum, dad, and the siblings all dangling off it. So if one of those elements of the mobile rattles, the whole family, moves around. In my family of origin, mum had all the anger, so I never learned how to deal with anger, and I always had to be the people pleaser, the happy little boy, so every time something happened that made me feel angry, I just pushed it down into the pressure cooker, and then at some stage somebody would say something slightly innocuous to me, and I'd explode like Vesuvius, and they get 10 years of swallowed anger, I'd blast them off the face of the planet.
Yeah.
So I know what you mean about.
It's the can of Coke analogy. You keep shaking it, eventually it's going to explode. And I actually heard you talking before about something similar about this, and you said, like, now you say when something bothers you. It's so simple, but it's so true. And it was a great reminder to me. Just speak your truth, and then you don't have to explode. You don't end up in that situation.
Yeah, but it's simple. It's simple, Liz. And I love keeping things simple. It's what I'm renowned for, other than asking blunt questions. But for me, feelings that you swallow will someday come back and choke you. That's one of my bumper stickers.
Yeah.
That's so true. And it also explains why suicide rates are so high, but it also explains why 75% of the suicides are male, because for generations and generations and generations, they have been told not to show any feeling, not to express any feelings. But for me, feelings are healings. It's that simple. There's nothing wrong in being vulnerable.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't know about you, but it took me a long time to learn that. I was great at saying that to everyone else. I was great when I was a social worker. Let it out, feel it to heal it, be honest. But it's the hardest thing to do if you're not used to doing it, or if that just wasn't the way of the world or the way of your family. It wasn't really till about 10 years ago that I learned to do that. And then I was able to stop having to bottle up my feelings by taking a bottle, drinking a bottle to keep them down, So yeah, it's not always straightforward, for sure.
Well, that's it. It's not straightforward, is it? It's learning or growing is a journey, not a destination, and yeah, I've just been told by Zoom that we've got about 10 minutes left. So if you feel you'd like to carry on beyond that, just let me know, and I'll just flash it up again so we can have a little tea break for a couple of minutes. But it's such an amazing topic, and there is a lot of support for mental illness in Australian society. It seems to be really trendy, and men's groups are really trendy now. Oh, I've joined a men's group. And I went down to the local men's shed the other day,
really?
And I was saddened to see all these retirees and pensioners, what used to be wise men in previous forms of our community. And I tried to get them to sit down and talk about their life and how they were feeling. Oh, sorry, mate. No, I can't. I'm too busy. I've got to make this park bench for. And so they're still running on that old conditioning that they're getting their sense of value, their sense of worth by how many widgets they can produce. Now, for me, I don't need to do anything to justify my life, to justify my experience, my right to live as a sovereign on this planet. And the other thing about all these mental health initiatives like Black Dog, Beyond Blue, all very well and good, but they're all funded by government. And I sound like a conspiracy theorist tonight. Well, there's no theory about it, it's fact. But you look at all these institutions and things, and people are donating and blah, 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 but they're all designed to keep the hamster wheel turning, because the governments are getting mega bucks from big pharma and the mental health industry to keep the current narrative in front of the people, keeping them believing the lie that this pill. I found that, well, no psychiatrist has ever claimed to have cured anybody. You won't find anyone. I didn't. I searched. And so psychiatrists just prescribe pills for you to cope with the pain. And then psychologists just provide you with coping skills so you can live with the pain. Now, you don't have to live with the pain, and I'm living proof of that, you know, but I use that energy of the pain to find my own way through. Now, I keep saying to people, I don't have your answers, but I might have some of your questions, because so many people are looking for their answers, but are they asking the right questions, you know? Anyway. So
well, I have a question for you. I have a question for you. When you were on the boat and you decided to have that cathartic experience, did your gut just tell you to do that? Did you plan it, or did you just say, this is what needs to happen now? Like, how did that come about?
I listened to my body.
You listened to your body, okay.
I listened to my...
That was it. That was all.
Well, previous to that, probably about a couple of weeks before that, I was on the boat. It's about 7:30 at night. I'm in a bay surrounded by mangrove trees where crocodiles live. I was down below on my laptop on my dog's Facebook page when all the lights went dim. And I couldn't breathe. I'd stopped breathing. I couldn't breathe. I looked over at the voltmeter, and 12.5 volts, that's all good. And I couldn't breathe. And then just off to the left of me was this black silky wispiness. And no matter how I turned, I couldn't, you know, get it in and bring it closer into my field of vision. It was just there. And I thought, oh God, no, it's all over, Red Rover. The Grim Reaper's come to get me. He said, hello, old friend, because I'd seen it before. So I just typed into Facebook, hey guys, if I don't post anything in the next 20 minutes, get the Volunteer Marine Rescue to come out and get Barnaby. Because I thought if I was going to die, and after Barnaby had eaten me, he'd starve. So my first thought was of Barnaby. And so I'm sitting there, and time is immaterial in these sort of close to death moments I have found.
Yeah. So
I just connected with my body. What does my body want to do? So I stood up, I'm naked, living on a boat on my own in the tropics. And I went up the companionway. I looked up at the sky, and there were 2 full moons. I could see 2 full moons, and I still couldn't breathe. And I just leapt over into the bay. It's after dark, surrounded by crocodiles. Sharks feed at night, you know. Bugger the sharks. I just leapt into the ocean, laid back like a great big starfish. And then all of a sudden, my body just went, and I was breathing again. And that was the night I consciously chose to bet my life on trusting my intuition. That was my rite of passage. There you go.
Is this in your book? Is this I know you have a book. Is that in your book?
Yeah.
I need to read this book. Wow, that's a powerful image, the whole thing.
And it's
what was the story?
Tonight.
2 minutes. Huh?
It's full moon tonight here where I am.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, I've just
look at it.
Yeah. I'll put your links to your material and products in the show description.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I've just finished another book, if I can find it. It's not published yet, so you'll be one of the first to see it just before the recording stops.
Insights from Beyond Depression. Amazing. I'd like to read that.
It's just a book.
I must send you a copy.
It's
Lovely.
just page after page of personal insights. Oh, sorry.
Beautiful. The other way was the right way. That's beautiful. And you know what? That's what people need when they're depressed. Something really simple to cut through. You know what I mean? It's hard to read a big volume of things, I think, if you're depressed, whereas just that image and that one line will really help people.
Yeah, well, intentionally, I put 52 insights in there, and I think 50 of them are mine, 2 I've stolen. But 52 weeks in a year, and it's a flip book, so you throw it open, and that's like the thought for the week. But also, I'm going to produce a deck of cards, because there are 52 cards in a deck with the same sort of information.
Excellent.
So my creative juice.
Gorgeous. That's really, really nice. Yeah, I really like it. And I like an idea of a week to ponder on something.
Yeah.
You know, instead of information overload. I know the time to go there. I have about 15 more minutes before to collect kids. Do you want to jump back on when that goes, or what do you want to do? I can come back on for another 15 if you can, but it's up to you.
Yeah, I'll go another.
Yeah.
I could go hours. I could go for another hour.
I know, only that it's nearly 10 at night here, and my neighbor has the kids, because there's no way they would let me talk without jumping on. So I said I'd come and get them at 10 o'clock. They give us some insights, all right.
It's Charlie, it's my kid.
Oh, Jack Russell.
Charlie.
Oh, look at him.
Because Valentine's Day is his birthday.
I love his head. I love the thing on his head. He's gorgeous.
Yeah, he's got.
Will I go? We get cut off, and then we'll come back on.
Okay.
What do you think?
Yeah. See you.
Will I use the same link?
Yeah.
Okay. Will I use the same link? Okay. Thanks. Thanks, Bob. Talk to you in a sec.
To be sure. To be sure. Sorry.
Yeah, I would love to hear more about the lucid dreaming, Bob. That's really interesting. So Eckhart Tolle did it, and you.
Yeah, we were talking about, when I was in automotive research, living in Headspace, my mind was like a tree full of chattering monkeys. And once I learned how to silence my mind, I could finally hear my heart. And now, in the silence, within the silence of my heart, I found a place I call my knowing, and my knowing has no words. It is a feeling. It is a feeling of contentment. It is a feeling of power. I feel as if I'm made of unobtainium, indestructible. But also, in that lovely warm place of my knowing, that's my connection to source, God, to creation. But it's also my connection to what people call the Akashic records, which is just, for me, it's a library of all that can ever be known. And it's during those periods of lucid dreaming that my connection is strongest. And that's where I get my downloads from. So, like my book, I didn't write my book. My book came through me, not from me. And it's the same with going on stage.
People saying that.
Yeah, when I go on stage, the music is coming through me, not from me. And it's that energy that the people pick up on first, because we are energetic beings, aren't we? Yeah, and I love Eckhart Tolle. He's come up with some crackers, and I think the the best thing that he ever said was,
he was one of my first go ahead.
The best thing he ever said was, totally let go of the need to understand anything. Now, for me, thinking is the weapon of mass distraction, because while people are thinking, they're in their monkey mind and not in their heart. That's why I call thinking is the weapon of mass distraction. And I try not to use the word thinking now. If somebody's sharing data with me, I will ponder it and let it sit and bubble like a pot of alphabet soup, you know. Yeah. This is great conversation.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, I really want to know more about how one does lucid dreaming. Is there anything about that in your book?
All I do is I lie down with my eyes closed and I get 2 or 3 sleeps in during a day. But one of them is usually all lucid dreaming, and just lying there and it just happens. I'm in that semi-conscious state between sleeping and awake. I don't know, there's probably loads of explanations out there on the internet, but for me, science is the sickness and nature is the cure. So it just happens naturally for me. And going back to the Bible, Adam and Eve got kicked out of the Garden of Eden. Well, I haven't seen them in my garden anyway, but they got kicked out of the Garden of Eden for eating from the tree of knowledge, which just says to me that the pursuit of knowledge is the original sin, which is why I say I prefer knowing to knowledge.
Yes.
Yeah. This is great. I love that. I'm shaking already.
Yeah. No, I love all that. It just really, really resonates with me. And, you know, it's an important message that you have, Bob. You know, that's an important message for people to hear. Because so much these days as well is pinned on what do we know, and, you know, what's your qualifications and what's your criteria and this and this and this, instead of like what's actually happening in here and where's your inner compass and your inner guide.
Yeah.
You know, like you said, kids are brilliant at just being in the moment. Kids are the most mindful thing ever. You know, like you said earlier, something happens, they react, but they recover. They don't, you know, if my child, something happens, she'll cry, but she won't be crying a half an hour later saying, oh, that was awful when that happened. She just cries when it happens and then it's over. Whereas we rehash it. Well, I rehash it and upset myself again. And when you're being mindful or mind empty and you're in your heart, you know, it's just a much more peaceful way to live. It took me a long time to get there myself, with that way of trying to do things. But it's just a much nicer existence, isn't it? Sensing your way around.
Well, now my life is simple. I don't know if I've already said this, you know, like when my body's tired, we sleep.
Yeah.
When my body's awake, we play. And so I get up at 3 a.m. Play on the computer till about 6, then I'm out in the yard, barefoot. I don't own a pair of shoes. Something will grab my attention, so I'll go and do that. And then something else I'll go and do that. So I spend my day like a butterfly, just going from things that interest me to the next thing. And that's it. It's keep it simple, sovereign. You know, you don't see dolphins swimming around.
You're in flow.
Manager, you know, stressing out because they're late for an appointment. They just spend their whole life giggling. So I learned from them. I giggle a lot.
And you know what? Well, I've only found the words recently to put on how I feel about that, because during the lockdown, I was able to be in flow. I didn't have to be anywhere at any time. Even though I have 2 small children, you know, okay, we were trying to get homework done or this or that, but we were in flow. And then when the lockdown ended, it started to get a bit busier. And suddenly my time was so fragmented that my brain just felt so fragmented. I love writing, I love going in the flow of it and just losing all sense of time. And it was only the other day that I was able to put the words on, and I was like, this fragmenting of time into all these little sections in life doesn't actually suit me. It doesn't suit me. It doesn't suit my way of being and my mind. And when we have the luxury of being able to be in flow, it's wonderful. Of course, for me, I can't be like that all the time. But having that awareness and being able to say, actually, no, I'm not going to try and squash that other thing in today. So I've just fragmented all my time up, you know. And I think a lot of people have learned that from the lockdown, maybe not in that specific way, but just that, you know, what really is important. And we don't want to all be running around like headless chickens. You know, being busy isn't cool, you know.
Well, being busy is the excuse that I believe millions of people in Western society, and I used it as well when I was in research. Being busy is a great way of avoiding taking time out to go within and do the work. So it's like, yeah. Oh no, I'm too busy to do all that inner work. You know, I've got to put food on the table, but you know, you can do both. You know, yeah. And
I've done it too, and occasionally I still do it.
Yeah. And denial is not a big river in Africa.
Well, that's a whole other YouTube conversation.
Yeah, why not?
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been really great chatting to you, Bob. It's fabulous. I really have enjoyed our chat. I hope we can do it again. And I need to get my hands on your books. They sound fabulous.
And just if you go to my YouTube channel, I've got a playlist there called Personal Growth. And there's lots of things about living in Heartspace, the end of depression, stuff I think you might resonate with. And it's all free. It's only the books that I'm charging for. So maybe, beautiful. Yeah. And
yeah, I'm checking it out for sure, and sharing it with other people.
Yeah, and what I'll say to you and anybody else that views this, you know, if you like what we shared, then tell all your friends, subscribe, give us a like. So if you like what we've shared, share it with all your friends, and if you didn't, keep your bloody mouth shut. See you next time.
Well, I have to see you, Bob. Thanks a million. You're a star. I look forward to talking to you again.
Bye.
Have a great day. See you. Bye, 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 bye.
Dun, 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 dun. Right.